Hey guys, I'm taking another crack at this unit because I started to write it and record it, and the issue was I kept thinking things were in the source because I had written them into it originally, but I'd released them in the version that I posted. So of course I'd be like, okay, well you just do this, and then of course the method wouldn't be there and I'd have to try and rewrite it from memory, and that's just not interesting to watch or hear me bitch about. So basically what I'm doing is I'm restarting this. I'm hoping I don't skip over anything because of course everything's written in now because I already did the video. I've labeled a lot of it so I shouldn't forget too much, but basically what we're going to be doing is going over how to write a simple packet logger into our proxy. So the first step here is we're going to go into the debug folder and create a new folder called packet logging. That's where all of our dumps of packets are going to go. I've already created that folder, as you can see, but you will need it for what we're writing here. Second thing will be, we need some way to control if we're logging. This is wrong because it's not a bool anymore. I changed it to an enum because I already have that nice drop down box for selecting everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our game user class. Now this is a very simple way of controlling everything. You always need variables to control new things you're adding. Sniff settings in this case is an enum, which can hold disabled, all, limited, server, and client. Not all these are in use. For example, limited would be you could enter a text box of packets that you do want to log, and it would only log those ones. So you could say, I only want to log general data packets, or I only want to log something else. I put that in there just because it was something I thought might be useful, but of course it's not implemented in this version. Again, you don't need to know anything about that. We have our enum set up. Public sniff settings, logging equals sniff settings disabled. This means by default we are not logging packets. We're not dumping them to a file. We created this object called logger, which is going to handle dumping of packets. What I'm doing here is when you initiate the logger class, it accepts a game user parameter, and it sets the owner, which lets us control, let's say we want to use the character name in this case, which, as you will see when I try and log, is not filled in right now because we're not reading that character name from packets. That will come into play in the next unit when we start structuring packets, and we'll be able to pull the character name from the hero information packet as we log in. So what we're doing is we're saying we're going to write to a file in application startup path, the folder packet logging which we just created, and then we're going to create a file called ownername underscore a random number 1 to a million.txt. As I mentioned in the old video where I rambled for far too long, you could do a counter for this, you could do date time, you could do the day of the month, you could do the hours, you could do anything like that. For now though, I'm just using a random number, which hopefully you're not going to have that many files being logged, so it shouldn't be an issue. So we're going to have that as our output file string. This int here, client logged and server logged, is just how many packets we have logged. What I'm going to do eventually is we're going to reset those numbers every time you start or stop logging. It's not in play right now, but it's very simple to do. We have two methods here called dump server packet and dump client packet. This string formatting here is actually stolen from Tanel's old proxy, which got leaked on epvp a long time ago. You don't really need to know too much about it. Basically what it's doing is it's trying to read TQ server or TQ client from the packet as a string. If so, it's boosting the packet length that we read from it. And it's basically a way to control how many loops we need to go through the packet, which we shouldn't need to because we're already splitting it. Then we're creating a new string here, basically saying packet number is this, the direction it's going, the length of the packet, and the packet type just as a header, and then we're going to dump the packet. And we're also dumping its basically converted to string data to the right side of the packet log. It makes things a lot easier to see, and you can find strings in it really easy then. So we have these two methods, and we need to now control when we're calling these. So we're going to go back to our GUI here. If you look at it, under packet logger we have sniff options, which is by default disabled. If I double click that, it goes to combo box 1 selected index changed. This is how we set up our sniffer. again, I could have used enums that match the strings and then just parsed them, but I didn't want to do that originally, and then of course I started recording the video and it was this way. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch based on selected item to string. So of course we have our disabled, all packets, server packets, and client packets. Those are the ones that we're handling. And by doing that, we then change the selected character logging to the logging settings that we are switching. Selected character was another thing in that video where it's null. It's not set up by default. You will need to set this up. The reason is it's using this selection box, which will allow you to control multiple characters from the same proxy window. So you could just select a character from the drop-down window and you would be able to control its hunting, mining, and PvP settings. Again, it wasn't in use originally, so what I had to do is when we receive a connection, so go to announce new connection here, I say if selected character equals null, selected character equals role, so the one that we've just created. This will bypass that selection box entirely. But what I did do is I say, no matter what you're adding to that select characters drop down, we're adding the item role. Now, this posed another issue in that the drop down would of course not list the character name, it would list a big long string saying the full long string to get to game user ProxyParadise.gameUser, etc., etc. So what we can do to bypass this is use an override. So if I type public override, we have equals get hash code, and we also have toString. And what this means is every time you try to use this object as a string, it will instead return whatever you have here. If we have the character name, we would do return name. No, not namespace, name. There we go. And that would then return whatever this string here is, which is of course blank, so I'm going to call it no name. So this lets us have nice fancy input and output on that drop down menu. Now of course it's not as simple as that. We need another thing. We need to be able to select those items from that drop down menu. So I'm going to double click that drop down menu and say we're going to try and parse it as a game user, or not parse, that's a string term. We're going to try and cast it as a game user. If it succeeds and is not null, which it won't be because it's a game user, we're going to say selected character equals role, what we just pulled. Again, that's not really in use right now, but this was all stuff I had to write during that video, which made it incredibly long and boring, even more so than this video, so you have that thank for this being slightly shorter, even though it's still long. Okay, so we've set up our settings, we've set up all the methods we need. We need now to say, actually dump those packets. So if you go to Network Packets Handler, we have our handle client, which is handling a single client packet. And we're going to say if role logging equals all, so we're logging all packets to file, or we're logging client packets to file, we're going to say the logger should dump a client packet data, which is of course what we're passing into this. Same with handle server, except of course we're going to do, if we're logging all or server packets, we're going to dump a server packet. Again, this is the methods here, which is formatting it all and then dumping it to this output file. So that's all very long and complicated, and you probably really don't care, but if you followed this, you should be able to set up your own packet logger. What I'll do though is I will post the completed version of this with this unit, so if you want to follow along, but of course I didn't post all of this code, I didn't type it all out, you'll be able to see it all there, because nothing's really been added. Now what we're going to do is we're going to log into a character and confirm that this all works. So of course we have no name now because we've selected it. That's the character we have selected. I don't want to do a quiz show. And as you can see, we have our new encryption. I don't know if I mentioned in this video or not. We've updated the encryption thanks to Fang. He cracked it and posted the very, very simple solution. Oh right, this is what I haven't shown you. I added simple methods to control that string output. under GUI. Sorry, again, I haven't looked at this. So output line string text. We are calling this from the packet handler's default. If it's an unhandled packet, we're going to say receive client packet of type type and receive server packet of type type. We then, of course, need to look at output line. This if invoke required, this invoke, all that good stuff. It's just a simple way to bypass cross-threading issues, which, if you don't understand that, you really don't need to worry about it right now at this point. Especially because I have check for cross-thread calls disabled, so it shouldn't even pose an issue, but I did this for simplicity's sake. We are saying we're going to create a new list of strings called lines, containing packets out, which is that giant text box there, lines to list. We are then inserting at the beginning our new line, and if we have more than 100 lines, we're going to remove the last line, so the oldest one. And then we're saying packet out lines equals lines to array, because that's what it is. It's an array, not a list. And then we're refreshing the draw window, which I don't even know if that's needed. I don't work with GUIs often, but I added it in there, and it works. We also have our button one click, which is that clear button, which you will notice works. It clears all the logs. It just sets lines to new string 0, and then refresh it again. So as you see, when I walk, we get a ton of 10,005 packets, which are walk packets. When I attack, we get our 1002, which is, or sorry, 122, which is going way down there already. That is an attack packet. Again, you don't need to worry about all this. We'll cover it in the next unit, which will cover structuring packets, and then we can move on from there to make our first little, I think I'm going to do a mine bot because they're very simple to do. Anyways, thanks again to Fang for the encryption. Feel free to post a thank for him because he deserves it, having not only cracked the encryption on his own, but also been willing to share it unlike everyone else on epvp. Not that I'm blaming anyone, it's just that he is willing to, and I appreciate that greatly. Anyways, hopefully you'll enjoy and still be able to use this cut down version of our unit, and hopefully I'll have time the next couple days to go into the actual packet structuring. Talk to you later.